The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi everyone. Welcome to this free webinar today. We're only going to go for 30 minutes. We've got a lot to get through, but welcome wherever you are. We've got a very big audience online, which is wonderful. Now, I just want to make sure that I'm being heard, so we'll do a quick sound check. If you go over to the right-hand side, you'll see a little question box there. Just open that up and just type in the word clear. That basically lets me know that you can hear me, which is great. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, John. Audio's clear. Thanks, Moya. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, it sounds like I am coming across loud and clear, which is great. Now, at the end of this, I'll send you a copy of this presentation, so you'll get a recording. But the other thing you'll get, of course, is the slides. So just relax and I'll go through it with you during our next 30 minutes together. Now, the concept of a job description, I wrote a book, as you can see there in front of you, called The End of the Job Description. So it gives you a bit of an indication what I think about job descriptions, not a lot. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'll go through that. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have a work document for people. I think we should. I think we should have a work document that I refer to as a role description rather than a job description. And that's just not a fancy title change. There is actually a reason why I suggest that, and I'll go through that in some detail shortly. So, and of course, the other thing is it's not a difficult process. A lot of people think that, you know, to change all of these things would require enormous effort. Not necessarily. So what I'm going to be covering in this 30-minute session is we're going to understand the importance of non-job roles. Now, non-job roles are the sleeper. They're the ones that really make the difference in terms of performance. And I want to talk about those and explain to you what they are and give you four in particular. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip on how to actually convert your job descriptions to role descriptions so that they better reflect these non-job roles I'm going to refer to, and then give you an opportunity to start thinking about some key performance indicators around these non-job roles. So it's a quick introduction, in other words, to the process. Okay, now, where did the job description come from? Now, Frederick Taylor, who was an engineer who basically was the architect of scientific management, I'm sure you've heard about. Scientific management was a concept that was used on the Ford assembly line in about 1917. And what Frederick Taylor was doing was looking at increasing efficiencies on this assembly line. And so what he did is he looked at each aspect of the car production, you know, the putting of the wheels on, the actual, you know, painting the car, putting the engine in, and so forth and so on. And of course, it was a complete assembly line, and he was looking at time and motion study. So he was looking at what he referred to as the one best way of doing things. And he worked out what that was, and then it was just a question of the person who was in charge of that task in the car assembly process to follow the system as prescribed by Frederick Taylor. And of course, what happened from there is McDonald's and many, many other organisations took on this concept of scientific management, where there was a precision to how things were done. And sort of born out of that was the concept of the job description. In other words, these are the things you're required to do, this is how you go about them, and here are the end results. But of course, we are living in a world that's not quite like the Ford assembly line anymore, are we? It is quite a different world that we live in, but we still have this document that we call a job description. And of course, the thing that I find quite amusing is that at the end of a job description, there's usually a little disclaimer that says something like, a legal disclaimer that says something like, you're required to complete any other duties not on the job description deemed relevant by your manager. In other words, what's the point of having the job description if there's a whole bunch of other things that we expect you to do as well as what's on the descriptor as well. So I think what's happened is that the job descriptions outlasted its usefulness. It was certainly useful in the scientific management years, but it's certainly not useful anymore. So I think we need to rethink what this job description looks like and what it really means. So this is the performance framework that we start with. Obviously, organisations have a vision statement. This is a clear statement of where we intend to be going. The mission statement is pretty much how we're going to get there. We then have a set of core values, and those values are the sorts of governing behaviours that will allow us to achieve our vision ultimately. And then we have role descriptions, which really pretty much encapsulate what the vision is of the organisation. We have some key result areas and some key performance indicators, and of course some targets. So all of these things actually should lock into place, but often they don't. I find that there's a discord often between the vision or the mission and perhaps some of the key performance indicators further down the organisation. So let's take a look at this a little further. Job descriptions, the first generation of job descriptions was pretty much just basically a list of things, a list of tasks that were required to do. So the very first job descriptions were just a list of tasks. Here are the things that you're required to do. There are 8 things on the list. Off you go. So the focus was very much on the job. And then the second generation of job descriptions was that not only the tasks were listed, but also the job competency. So this was about the requirements of the individual. So they were looked at and they were incorporated into this work document we still call a job description. Now, I'm suggesting now there's a third generation that I'd like to think that I'm part of, which is now looking at a new work document that talks about the non-job roles and competencies that people are expected to play. And I'm going to share with you 4 of those, and I'm sure they will resonate with you in your organisation. I have no doubt about that. But just before I do that, I think the important point I'd make about the job description is that it pretty much basically involves everything that goes on in an organisation. If you think about it, we recruit people on the basis of a job description. In other words, we go out and look for people who pretty much fit the criteria that the job description entails. And then when we select people for the job, normally we ask them questions that centre around the job description. And then when we induct people in the organisation, we tend to use the job description as an opportunity to explain things to people. And then when we train and develop people, we tend to look very much at the technical requirements on the job description and send people off to training so that they can do those tasks more effectively. And then when we remunerate people, and perhaps where we give people pay rises, is normally when they excel in or mastery. They have greater mastery in those tasks that are on their job description. And when we're looking at promoting people, particularly into managerial positions or leadership positions, we'll often do it on the basis of their mastery of the job description. And then, of course, we review people's performance based on the job description. So the job description governs pretty much everything that we do in organisations. So if there's a deficiency in the job description, and I believe there is, then it's obviously going to impact on everything else that we do in the workplace, and that's, in my view, problematic. So here's a statement that I'd make, and I realise it might be a bit provocative, but I believe it's true, and I'll explain why I think that in a moment. But I'd suggest to you that the roles that people play in organisations are more important than the jobs that they do. So what are these roles that I'm talking about? So let's actually look at this from a role perspective. So when people come into organisations, I would argue that they play a variety of roles. Now, one of those roles that they play, of course, is the job role. So they expect to do what's on this work document we call a job description. But if that's all they do, then they're only doing part of their role, because there are other things that they should be doing that are not necessarily written on this job description that make a big difference. So let's have a look at what they are and try and understand what I'm on about here. So if we think about work like this, so the work that people do, I would argue, is two-dimensional. So you have, on the one hand, you have a job role, as I mentioned, and in the job role, there are a series of technical requirements. Now, that work is covered in the job description. But the problem here is that we've only covered one dimension of performance. There is another dimension of performance that's critical to work that's not covered in the job description, and that's this one here. This is the non-job roles. Now, for the last 30 odd years, people have tried to work out what are these generic non-job roles that all organisations should be, they're applicable to all organisations. And they've dilly-dallied around a bit with that, and I sort of thought to myself, no, I'm going to bite the bullet on this and come up with a series of non-job roles that I believe are critically important for an organisation. And what I'm going to do is talk about 4 of those. And I'm sure you would agree that these 4 are very applicable to your own organisation. The first non-job role that people play in work, or indeed should play, is having a positive attitude and enthusiasm. Now, I don't expect people are going to come to work bouncing off the walls with excitement. That's not what I'm really on about here. But I don't also expect people to come to work backbiting, whinging, moaning, complaining, playing organisational politics. You know what I mean. And when people do that, it is enormously destructive to the morale of the organisation. And so I think it's reasonable that we can expect people to have a positive attitude and enthusiasm. We all have a bad day at the office, true enough, but we wouldn't want to be doing that every day. And so I think that's a non-job role that's critically important, but it's not written in the job description, as I'm sure you're aware. Another non-job role that I think is critically important is a team role. We expect people to operate in teams, don't we? Organisations are flatter now. We expect people to actually operate and work effectively across a number of teams. And of course, some people we know would actually claim that they're not team players. In other words, that they come to work, they do what's on their job description, and they're not interested in being a team player. Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me, and it shouldn't work for you too. I believe people have a responsibility to be team players. In other words, they have a team role to play. But again, it's not usually listed on the job description. The third one that I would suggest to you that's important is the skill development role. I think everyone has a responsibility to continually upgrade and develop their skill set. Because obviously if you stop doing that, you go backwards because the world's moving so quickly. But how often do you have people say to you, for example, I'm too old to go to that training program, or I've been used to using this spreadsheet for years and I don't want to change. So you hear this resistance to learning all the time and skill development, but I believe that a non-job role that's critically important to be successful, both as an employee and a business, in 2019 is for people to continually upgrade and develop their skill set. But again, it's not written on the job description. And the final role, and I'm not suggesting there's only 4, but these are 4 that I believe are critically important to your business and mine and everybody else's, is an innovation and continuous improvement role. In other words, I expect people to come to work, not leave their brains in a paper bag at the doorway, and come up with suggestions and ideas about how they might improve the workplace to make it a better place to work. Now, again, there's a lot of resistance to this, and people often don't volunteer or suggest ways and means of making the workplace more efficient and effective. Many people believe that that's the boss's job, but it's actually everybody's job. But again, where is that written in the job description? Now, just think about this. If you've still got some doubts about this, could you imagine what your workplace would be like if, on the one hand, everybody had a negative attitude? So everybody was backbiting, whinging, complaining, and carrying on. Everybody was an individual and nobody wanted to be a team player. Everybody had stopped growing and developing because they just didn't see any need to do it. And everybody left their ideas and suggestions in their head and didn't want to contribute anything to making the workplace more effective. Do you think that would be a very productive workplace? It wouldn't matter what the technical skill level of those people would be. It would be a poorly performing team without any doubt, and I'm sure you'd agree. So you can see that these non-job roles are critically important to success. This is the dimension that's left off the job description, you see. So because the job is just around the technical confines. So I would argue that individuals, when they come to work, actually play 5 roles. One role is a job role. One role is an attitude role. One role is a team role. One role is a skill development role. And one role is an innovation and continuous improvement role. Now, if people are playing those 5 roles, then I would suggest that they are performing in a rounded way. So the question is, how do we move from a job description to a role description as such? Now, if you've got any doubts at all about this, here's a survey that was done in 2012. 9,000 people, these were managers and owners of business, who were asked, what are the 10 things that you look for the most in an employee? All right, so when you select an employee, what are you looking for? And here were the 10 things. I'll put them all up fairly quickly. And what's interesting about, you have a look down the list, this was a frequency survey. These, so what you're seeing is the top 10 things in terms of their popularity. These were the things that people indicated were the top 10 things out of 9,000 employers and in managers. If you cast your eyes down that list, you will notice that there's not one mention of technical skills. Now, that's because people see that as a given. They're looking for those value-added non-job roles that I've just spoken about, and you'll notice that enthusiasm's number 1, communication, so forth and so on. So you can see that that's what people want, but yet our job description doesn't really talk about those things. So you can see that the job description is outdated. It's no use to us. We need to incorporate non-job roles in the work document that people use. So the difference is that the job description usually defines a set of tasks and responsibilities that are performed by the particular job owner. That's what that basically means. But if we look at the technical, the role description, it defines the role, which is the technical tasks, and also the non-job roles that I've just gone through. So in other words, what we're basically doing is we're tacking on the non-job roles, the 4 of them, onto the job description, so that we're creating a more holistic perspective about what performance really is and what it is in the workplace. So let's have a look at some of the key performance indicators around those 4. So I've done some work on this, and I thought, because a lot of people say, oh, well, how can you measure attitude? And how do you know, how can we, we can't really be objective about these things. I think we can. I could walk into your place of work tomorrow, sit there for 20 minutes, and I know I can tell you who would have the right attitude. And guess what? If you and I sat down and had a cup of coffee and shared notes, I'll guarantee that we would be aligned on that. So it is really obvious. It's not as if it's some strange thing that we wouldn't be able to pick. But the key indicators are, I think, we need to ensure that, if we're talking about attitude, we define it as someone who is solution focused rather than blame focused. This is a person who's looking for solutions to problems. I would suggest that a positive attitude would also indicate a person who has a high degree of autonomy. In other words, they work things out themselves rather than coming to their manager for answers. That would be another indicator. Another indicator, of course, is that they'd have a positive energy about them, and that positive energy, of course, would rub off on their colleagues in the workplace. So you can see that we can already start to develop some concepts about what we mean by this. And I've done all this, all the work's been done for you in that book, The End of the Job Description. So all of that's there, and I'm just giving you a thumbnail sketch. What about the team role? Well, if I was looking for somebody who was a team player, what am I actually looking for? I'm sure you would agree it would be probably somebody that would have the ability to influence other people when they needed to, but also be willing to be influenced by other people when they need to. In other words, they'd have a role, in the right place at the right time where they would lead because they might lead a discussion on something because they feel strongly about it or have a certain expertise, but at other times they'd sit back and allow other people to take that role. I would expect that people would take two forms of accountability, one for their job and the other for the team, overall team result, not just sit there and say, oh, well, I'm just doing my job, I'm just filling out my job description and, the rest of it can take care of itself. So no, there's an accountability for the team as well. For the skill development role, which is the third element, I'd be expecting people to invest in their own self-development, whether it's reading books or whatever it might be. I'd be expecting to see some evidence of that. But I'd also be expecting to see some evidence of some technical development as well. So in other words, skill development could be both self-development and technical development. So I'd be looking for those things. I'd be looking for evidence of those as well. So you can see that we can start to develop a pretty good understanding of what we expect in these things, and all the heavy lifting's done for you here, you see. So if I'm looking for someone who is continually improving the workplace and being innovative, I'm looking for people who are problem solvers and are thinking critically about things and not just allowing other people to come up with the response to that. I'm also looking for someone who's customer responsive. So by being customer responsive, people are more likely to adjust their approaches, their systems, their whatever, to meet and suit the customer's needs. So there's going to be some evidence of that, no doubt, if that person was being innovative and continuously improving. All right, and of course, when we talk about innovation and continuous improvement, really, what are we talking about? We're talking about improving quality or reducing time or reducing costs or increasing output or increasing safety or meeting deadlines, enhancing interpersonal cooperation or streamlining systems and processes. All of those things come into play. Okay. So here's a glimpse of one of the pages in my book, The End of the Job Description, and you can see there that the element is taking responsibility, and underneath that there are 10 key performance indicators, and you could actually rate people on those 10 indicators. So all the heavy lifting is done for you. It's really a question of making a decision to move from a job description to a role description. So the question is, how do you do that? Well, there are several ways of doing it. and I'm going to just give you a couple of glimpses about how you would do it, but it's not as difficult as you might think. We'll work on the assumption that the job description itself is being reasonably well written. So let's imagine that, so in other words, what we're actually doing is value adding to the job description. In other words, we're bolting on, if you like, these 4 non-job roles onto the job description. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can get, if there's say 2 people doing the same job, we can get them together to actually discuss some of those non-job roles and how they impact on the work that people do. We could get the whole team, if they all have a generic role, such as salespeople, we could all get them involved in the discussion around the non-job roles. We could get the supervisor and the person in the job to get their heads together and start to put that together. Or, of course, if there's only one person doing the job, we could ask them to consider it and to put their head together on that one as well. All right, so I'll just go back one step. So so really the generic non-job roles have been designed for you. The key performance indicators around those have been designed for you. So in other words, it would be taking those, discussing them with the relevant people, maybe just tinkering with them to make sure that they are relevant to the particular job, and therein you have your role description. Okay, so it's not difficult. And then what you're doing is you're broadening performance beyond just the simple job role, and then you've got role descriptions, not job descriptions. So I hope you found that useful. If you'd like to know more about it, or you would like me to assist you in your organisation to move in the right direction there, just send me an email or give me a phone call or call me. Happy to come in and assist where I can. And so that's just, if there's any questions or comments that you've got before we wrap up today, I'm more than happy to take them. So just type in the question box over there, and I'll do my very best to answer them briefly and to the point. Just while we're thinking about that, I have a little plug I want to give you. I've got a Lunch and Learn series, which is an online series done in a similar way to this for leaders, and it's coming up on the 6th of September. That's a Friday, and it's not too far away, so you are more than welcome to either attend yourself or anyone else in your organisation. The cost is only $295 per person, and for that $295 you get 6 modules, which you can see on the left hand side. You get the recordings and the slides. You get time with me in between sessions. We set homework specifically to help people embed those concepts into their workplace. So it's good value. There are 2 diagnostics involved with that process as well. So it's a very popular series, and we'd love to see you involved. And just as a little sweetener, if you get back to me by the close of business today, I'm happy to give you a 10% discount on that $295. So there's a great incentive for you. So folks, that's pretty much it for me. I don't think we've got any questions at this stage, and it looks as if we're just about done. So thank you for your patience and involvement, and I wish you a really great weekend. Don't forget the Lunch and Learn series. Get back in touch with me if you want to get that discount. Just send me an email. I'll send you all the details you need, and we'd love to see you in the Lunch and Learn series. Or if you need help on turning your job descriptions into role descriptions, you know where to get me. So thanks everyone. Have a wonderful weekend and all the very best. Thank you and goodbye.